Charles Bronson was a famous American actor who appeared in both film and television. He became famous for his portrayal of rugged heroes. Bronson has such large, intense eyes that it's hard to take your gaze off of him. Jill Ireland appears to have developed a soft spot for Bronson, despite the fact that he was notoriously uncaring toward his film co-stars. Although their love story lived up to expectations, it was far from a fairy tale ending. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into this tale of love, loss, and personal growth if you're curious about the reason behind it all. Ehrenfeld, New York was the site of Bronson's birth on November 3, 1921. He went to war. Near Johnstown in Pennsylvania, you can find coal mines in the Allegheny Mountains. His Lithuanian ancestors were devout Roman Catholics. Out of 15 children, he was the 11th. In their Coldwater shack, the enormous family slept in shifts. The mine's coal car lines were just a short distance away. He was fathered by Walter Bukinski. He came from the southern Lithuanian village of Druskininkai and was a Lipkataughter. Originally from Lithuania, Bronson's mother was named Mary. She was born in the Pennsylvania town of Tamaqua, which is rich in coal. When asked about his childhood, Bronson said that, like many other first-generation Americans, he didn't hear many English sounds at home. Even while serving in the military, his fellow troops believed he was from another nation due to his strong accent, he claimed once. In addition to English, he was fluent in Russian and Lithuanian. Bronson admitted in a 1973 interview that he was unsure of his feelings toward his father and didn't know much about him. He claimed his sole recollection of his father was the fact that his siblings would take cover every time their mother announced his return home. After his father passed away from cancer in 1933, Bronson took a job in the coal mines, first as an office clerk and later as a miner. He subsequently recalled that for each ton of coal he extracted, he was paid $1. However, he revealed in a subsequent interview that he worked 2 shifts solely to earn $1 per week, equivalent to approximately $24 in today's money. Clearing stumps between the mines, an area prone to cave-ins, was a hazardous task that Bronson and his brother recalled doing later in life. He recounts how his impoverished family suffered through the Great Depression and how often he went hungry as a result. Warm tea was served to his sister since, for some reason, their mother did not give her milk. He mentioned that they were short on clothes for him, so he wore his older sister's dress to school. When Bronson finished high school, he became the first in his family to do so. I'm Keough, on ground before enlisting in the United States Flexible Gunnery Training Squadron, which was during the dark days of WWW2. He flew missions against the Japanese home islands in 1945 as an aerial gunner with the 61st Bombardment Squadron of the 69th Bombardment Group, which was based on Guam. His plane was a Boeing B-29 Superfortress. Despite suffering wounds from combat, he completed 25 missions and was decorated with the Purple Heart. Charles found himself in a precarious position after the war ended. He didn't discover a new purpose until he met touring performers. Education and work experience. Bronson worked odd jobs after W2. He began performing in supporting roles shortly after being hired by a Philadelphia theater company to paint sets. Subsequently, Bronson and fellow actor Jack Klugman lived together in a New York City apartment. This completed the process. He enrolled at the Pasadena Playhouse in Hollywood to hone his acting skills. Despite going uncredited, Bronson made his film debut in You're in the Navy Now, 1951, directed by Henry Hathaway, playing the role of a sailor. The story goes that he was cast for the role due to his unique ability to burp when asked. He also appeared in 2 other 1951 films, The Mob and The People Against O'Hara. John Sturges directed both of them. Red Skies of Montana, Bloodhounds of Broadway, Battle Zone, Pat and Mike, Diplomatic Courier, and My 6 Convicts by Henry Hathaway were all features of his 1952 film roster. Also that year, on Roy Rogers' show Knockout, he squared off against Rogers in a ring. On an episode of The Red Skelton Show, he appeared as Cauliflower McPug, a fighter who shared the stage with Skelton. On the CBS espionage series Biff Baker from the US, he co-starred with Lee Marvin. On this day in 1915, he portrayed the role of Igor, Vincent Price's assistant, in André Detoth's horror film House of Wax. To be ready for his role as a deaf person, he enrolled in a sign language. In his role as the deaf and dumb assistant to the madman, Bukinski brings a mute menace, as noted by Ben S. Parker of the Commercial Appeal. With $23 million in ticket sales, it was the fourth highest grossing film of that year in the United States. In 2014, The House of Wax was preserved for all time when the Library of Congress added it to the National Film Registry. In 1954, he decided to go by Bronson in the anti-Soviet climate that has persisted since the House Un-American Activities Committee hearings. Numerous names from Eastern Europe have sounded suspicious. The Bronson Gate is located at Paramount Studios on the corner of Melrose Avenue in Bronson. The plot of the film Bronson was based on this. In the 1999-2000 war film Never So Few, directed by John Sturges, Bronson had a small role. He appeared as a guest star on Yancey Derringer, Hell and High Water, and You in 1999. Marshall Keough. After landing his first few parts, Charles continued to have success in the entertainment industry. He portrayed a heroic gunfighter in John Sturges's 1960 film The Magnificent Seven, which fought for the defenseless. Bronson received $50,000 for the role, which is a lot more money now, according to Eli Wallach, who co-starred with him. During filming, Bronson was a loner who kept to himself. The film bombed in America, but it was a smash in Europe, so it turned a profit. The U.S. National Film Registry of the Library of Congress selected the film for preservation in 2013 due to its cultural, historical, and aesthetic significance. A reviewer in Harrison's reports praised it as a superb Western, well acted and crammed full of action, human interest, pathos, suspense, plus some romance. And his 1970 television appearances included Street of Hate on Laramie, The Generous Politician on The Islanders, and Zigzag on River. Hennessy gave him a steady role in season 2. Episode 26, The Nagudnik, which aired in 1991, was the second appearance of these characters.
The first was in episode 3.
Kiss 15, directed by Richard Donner, A Thunder of Drums starring Joseph Newman, and Master of the World starring William Whitney, were all released that year, and Bronson had small roles in each. Bronson made his television debut in 1961's The Last Round episode of One Step Beyond. He went on to co-star with Elizabeth Montgomery in 2 of The Twilight Zone. In 1961, he received an Emmy Award nomination for his guest appearance in Memory in White of CBS General Electric Theater. He appeared in Kid Galahad, Elvis Presley's film, the following year. Bronson starred as a POW in John Sturges' 1963 suspense thriller, The Great Escape, which received positive reviews from critics. According to Rotten Tomatoes critics, The Great Escape is an all-time action classic. Its story builds slowly but surely, and its cast is one for the ages. The film earned $11.07 million from 11 theaters out of a budget of $4 million. As one of the year's most successful films, it grossed a tidy. The film was nominated for Best Picture at the Golden Globes and holds the 19th spot on Effie 100 Years. 50 thrilling moments, even after he began focusing more on European films in 1968. He continued to work on numerous standards and hits. The filmmakers behind Gene Herman's French film Adieu l'ami initially met Bronson on the set of Villa Rides. After seeing Bronson's work, Alain Delon expressed interest in collaborating with an American actor. Paul Kohner, Bronson's agent, later claimed that the producer had assured him that his client would have a stellar performance in the film. In America, film is all about pretty boy heroes. In Europe, though, character is more important than face. Bronson was signed in December 1967. Marseille and Paris were used to make the picture. It was a $6 million smash in France. Bronson continued to appear in a series of international productions. Films made in Europe became immensely popular. The energy between Delon and Bronson is supposedly phenomenal, according to TV Guide. Leone's spaghetti western Once Upon a Time in the West was another European smash, and Delon played a leading role. Oh, Leone was cast in the lead role of 1964's A Fistful of Dollars, which Bronson declined. The film grossed 8 million tickets in Italy and over 5 million in the United States. In France, ticket sales were around 14 million more than in Germany and 13 million more than in the United States. The Library of Congress added it to the U.S. National Film Registry after agreeing that it was culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. Some also ranked it as one of the greatest westerns of all time and one of the greatest movies of all time. The greatest actor I ever worked with, according to Leone. Bronson had a string of successful collaborations with United Artists, beginning with Michael Winner's 1972 film Chatto's Land. Later on, they collaborated on films like The Mechanic and The Stone Killer, which were produced by Leone and Winner respectively. By 1973, Bronson had become the highest-grossing movie star in the world, earning $1 million for each of his films. At the age of 52, Bronson landed his biggest role in Michael Winner's Death Wish, which was also his most popular film. In it, he played the role of Paul Kersey, a prosperous New York builder who becomes a vigilante following the murder of his wife and the sexual assault of his daughter. Over the next 2 decades, Bronson appeared in 4 more films, all of which were heavily criticized for being offensive, labeled an immoral threat to society, and serving as an example of how to behave badly toward others. Charles Bronson became famous in action movies, and he continued working in those genres over the years. That year, though, it made $22 million, making it the 21st highest grossing picture in the U.S. He had a couple of low grossing roles in 1975 for Tom Grise, including Breakout and Break Heart Pass, a Western adapted from a book by Alistair MacLean. That same year, he made his directorial debut as Walter Hill, playing the role of a Great Depression-era street fighter who lived off the streets of Louisiana. The critical reception was positive, and the film's $5 million in receipts placed it 29th in the U.S. that year. Roger Ebert praised it, calling it a powerful, brutal film containing a definitive Charles Bronson performance. In 1975, Bronson was the 4th highest grossing actor at the box office, behind Robert Redford, Barbra Streisand, and Al Pacino. The following year, he starred in Frank D. Gilroy's From Noon to 3, a Western comedy for youth. At the same time, he collaborated for the first time with director J. Thomas Lee. Irvin Kershner's Raid on Entebbe, which Bronson portrayed as Dan Shamron in 1997, was an NBC television movie based on a true story about the Entebbe raid that initially received mostly positive reviews. It was adapted into a film in early 1977 and became a box office smash in the UK and other European countries, with the goal of maximizing the great ensemble cast. In addition to being nominated for several awards, the show was named Best Television Movie at the Golden Globes and was nominated for Outstanding Special Drama or Comedy at the Emmys. In the same year, Bronson co-starred with Thompson in Dino De Laurentiis' The White Buffalo, which was shot at the UA. The same year, the studio also released Telekin, directed by Dun Siegel, and Bronson became famous as the lead in 1977's Raise the Titanic. He was in the film, but not in the main role. In the 1970s, Bronson turned down Ingmar Bergman's offer to collaborate on a film, claiming that Bergman's films are boring. "Everything is weakness and sickness with Bergman," he said. Capricorn 1 was another major role who looked too ordinary. Christopher Reeve was cast instead. Capricorn 1 was another major role he was rumored to be interested in for a 1978 film. He was also tried out for the role of Snake Plissken in the 1981 film Escape from New York, but director John Carpenter thought he was too old and tough-looking for the part. Instead, Kurt Russell was cast. Brother Bronson was involved in 2. On the other hand, ITC has produced Love and Bullets and Borderline. In Cabo Blanco, he reunited with Thompson. In Peter Hunt's 1981 action picture Death Hunt, co-starring Lee Marvin, Bronson plays the role of Albert Johnson, based on a fictional account of the chase by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The film earned $5 million at the box office in the United States, and according to Vincent Canby's review in the New York Times, the two veterans behind it. Mr. Bronson and Mr. Marvin have made so many of these kinds of movies that they can each make up a character out of thin air. In the past, Bronson had a number of high-paying roles in films produced by smaller studios like Cannon Films. In a deal worth $1.5 million, Bronson joined forces with Cannon to star in Death Wish 2, a picture that will also be directed by Michael Winner. The plot revolves around engineer Paul Kersey, who is involved in a series of bizarre... Bronson reprises his role as a father figure who travels to Los Angeles with his daughter's murder at the hands of a gang. Kersey once again assumes the role of an outlaw. Bronson was immediately cast by Cannon Films in 10 to Midnight, playing the role of a police officer pursuing a serial killer. This marks their fourth collaboration. James Bronson, J. Thomas Lee were cast by ITC Entertainment in The Evil That Men. Cannon Films reunited Bronson and Winner for Death Wish 3. Thompson oversaw the film Murphy's Law, in which Bronson portrayed Jack Murphy, a grumpy and angry Los Angeles Police Department officer who uses alcohol to numb his emotions. "It's a complete departure for me," Bronson said of his role as Union boss Joseph Yablonsky in John Mackenzie's 1986 film Act of Vengeance, which is based on a true story. In the HBO TV movie, he played the opposite type of character. "Neither a mustache nor a firearm are visible on my person at this moment. In this film, I refrain from using physical force." According to him, he had to really consider it before accepting, because it was a long time since he had done any television acting. His mining background helped him with this. In order to work on this film, he had to step down from his lead role in the Delta Force. Robert DiMatteo of the Advocate Messenger and Greg Berlier of the Kingston Whig Standard both praised Bronson for his authentic performance. Despite his fame and fortune, Bronson remained troubled by his childhood losses and the difficulties of acting. In 1973, an article claimed that he was so reserved and quiet that he couldn't even watch his own films. According to Forbes, Bronson was still suspicious, still holds grudges, still hates interviews, still hates to give anything of himself, still can't believe it has really happened to him. He was fuming over his sudden fame in the U.S. and his subsequent struggles with depression and anxiety. According to Roger Ebert's 1974 review, Bronson doesn't give away information, doesn't go into detail, and doesn't have any ideas about his movies. He claims that he would never work for a famous director who had rejected him before. In the early 1960s, near the end of Hollywood's golden age, Charles Bronson met Jill Ireland, who was working as a screenwriter. He said that Bronson threatened to get Jay Cox, a Time magazine reviewer, because Cox had written a negative review that Bronson interpreted as an attack on his character. He also said that, unlike other actors who portrayed violent roles on screen, Bronson seemed violent in real life. In Charlie and Me, it is mentioned that he and his wife Harriet Tendler met at an acting school in Philadelphia, but their backgrounds couldn't have been more different. Tendler came from a wealthy dairy farming family, while Bronson was born into extreme poverty. Tendler was 18 years old at the time. It even covered my living expenses. They met and became best friends, which evolved into a much more serious relationship. Both of them were struggling actors hoping for that big break, and Harriet helped them both along the way. Slowly but surely, opportunities began to fall into Bronson's lap. When the people who made John Sturges' movie The Great Escape called, he was happy to take the next step in his career. However, this was the start of the end for Tendler. They were no longer together. It was lucky for Bronson that Steve McQueen, James Garner, James Coburn, and Richard Attenborough all became co-stars on one of his shoots. David McCallum didn't stop giving us the best feelings when he brought his wife Jill to see the play. Bronson is said to have told McCallum that he was going to steal his wife, which made the Scottish star very angry. As promised, what was bound to happen did happen. It was 1965 when Bronson and Tendler broke up, and it was 1967 when McCallum and Ireland did the same. It was in 1968 that Charles Bronson married Jill Ireland. The rest, as they say, is history. The romance was the beginning of a friendship that was romantic and practical. And despite their anger at each other, Bronson and McCallum had reconciled and resolved their issues amicably. 2 children were born to Bronson's first marriage to Harriet Tendler, 3 to Jill's marriage, 1 adopted child, and 2 biological children, Zuleika and Katrina, who they also adopted. The couple resided in a massive mansion in Bel Air, Los Angeles, where they fell madly in love and went on to produce 16 films as a business partnership. Bronson was famous in the industry and ensured that Ireland would frequently play the lead or supporting role in his future projects. Bronson gave her plenty of opportunities, despite the fact that she was not nearly as famous as her husband. She had little parts in films like Terence Young's Romeo and Juliet and Robert Mitchum's Dinner Date in Buzz Kulick's Villa Rides. In Assassination by Peter Hunt, The Valachi Papers, and her last film, she spared no effort in making the most of her screen time. Of all the films they collaborated on, Frank D. Gilroy's From Noon Till 3 may have been the most expressive of their love for one another. Typically, Bronson hogs the spotlight while Ireland plays supporting roles such as an extra, a femme fatale, who can subtly alter the protagonist's trajectory. The main character of this romantic comedy western, played by Jill Ireland, is the Irish Amanda. She breathes life into an otherwise lifeless picture. Some have speculated that Bronson gave his wife the part so she could showcase her acting abilities in a different light. The way Ireland describes her reveals her role in their relationship. She was the one who revealed a lovely side of the frequently misunderstood. Bronson and Ireland were the light at the end of a dark tunnel for him. Her picture-perfect features and endearing personality enhanced the photos. To put it mildly, they were overjoyed. Ireland and her husband were one of Hollywood's most formidable couples, and her star continued to rise with each film until they received the devastating news that Jill Ireland had breast cancer in 1984 and passed away today. Ireland wrote 2 books about her courageous battle with the disease over 6 years. Life Wish, a personal story of survival and lifeline in my fight to save my family, and was honored with the American Cancer Society's Charles Was Never the Same after losing his wife, who had been awarded the Presidential Medal of Honor for courage to a fatal illness at their Malibu home in 1999. Despite his marriage to singer Kim Weeks in 1998, he kept Ireland close to his heart and even made an empty cane to honor her memory. The casket was custom made for him, and he carefully placed his late wife's ashes inside. In recognition of her contributions to the film industry, Jill Ireland was honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame on Hollywood Boulevard. In the same year, Jill Clyburn starred as the titular character in the made-for-TV film Reason for Living, The Jill Ireland Story. The film was adapted from Ireland's autobiography Lifelines and was named after her when she passed away. It was met with mixed reviews upon its release. Clyburn, in preparation for the role, studied Ireland's memoir Lifelines and listened to interviews in which Ireland was interviewed. Although Charles Bronson was a Hollywood star, he had a difficult life and had to endure some tough jobs and careers, like working in a coal mine and as a shooter on a B-29 during W2. He got his big break in the movie business, but it was meeting Jill Ireland that really changed his life. It's cool to watch Charles Bronson fall in love with someone. For the most part, the star wasn't acting himself when he let out even a hint of emotion, but love can move even the toughest people. He couldn't handle how incredibly kind and beautiful Jill Ireland was. They fell in love with him after he let down his guard. After collaborating on countless films, this will forever serve as a poignant reminder of one of the most iconic film pairings of all time. Charles Bronson passed away on August 30, 2003, at the age of 81, following the untimely demise of his partner. He passed away at the age of 81 at the Los Angeles Hospital Cedars Sinai. Rumor has it that he died of pneumonia and Alzheimer's disease. but that's not on his death certificate. Instead, respiratory failure and metastatic lung cancer are listed as the main causes of death, with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and congestive cardiomyopathy listed as secondary cause. He was laid to rest in the Brownsville Cemetery in West Windsor, Vermont, with Jill Ireland's ashes in the canes symbolizing their youth. Film critic Stephen Hunter remarked of Bronson at the time of his death that he was oozing male life force. He constantly exuded the allure of uncertainty. Was he a handsome, ugly man or an ugly, handsome man? Hunter said he never became a great actor, but he knew exactly how to dominate a scene quietly. Bronson was the man whose name ended in a vowel. You were never sure, so you had to study him more. His nobility shone through even when he never spoke a word about it. He never complained, skulked, or quit. Despite his class resentments, he hung in there, got the job done, and didn't expect thanks. I'm only a product like a cake of soap, to be sold as well as possible, Bronson told critic Roger Ebert in 1974. There wasn't much time for him to play since he was busy making movies. He pointed out, I bring something to the role. There are never any long dialogue scenes to establish a character. He has to be fully established and ready to work at the start of the movie. The director added, Bronson need not have said that. Don't go into too much depth regarding his methods or what he does. The film camera picks up on his unique quality. The legacy of Charles Bronson has had a profound impact on the action genre. Other action heroes will admire him for his style and his ability to understand the situation. Morality, right and wrong, and vengeance were central themes in Bronson's film. Directors were encouraged to make more films with these themes because they were easy for viewers to stay interested in. His depictions of extremely complex people are even more impressive. Begin to implement intricate shifts in the traditional gender roles featured in film. It elaborated on the manhood concept in far more detail. So, Bronson, many action stars got their starts, and his influence is strong even now. Bronson received rave reviews for his roles in a number of films throughout his career. The fact that he was well-liked and esteemed by others, despite his lack of major award success, speaks volumes about his talent and the influence he had in his profession. Despite his passing, Bronson's legacy will endure. An important reason he remains one of the most influential filmmakers of all time is, without a doubt, the compelling and emotionally taxing stories told in numerous of his films. His admirers and critics keep referencing his films to ensure that his significant contributions to the industry will not be overlooked. So far as anyone can tell from Bronson's backstory, he has inspired many aspiring actors and filmmakers. His tale of overcoming adversity to amass vast riches will resonate with people who can relate. Those who have thoughts but lack confidence in their own opinions will also benefit from this. Share your thoughts with us by clicking the like button, subscribing, and commenting below.